station, right? And the artist who's done the work for this station is Chua Ek Kay. This is what he looks like. Does he look like an artist?
No.
No. What does he look like?
Like a bachelor.
Like a bachelor? So a bachelor can't be an artist? He's an artist who worked in Singapore. He was born in 1947 and he died in 2008. And he worked mainly in ink.
Chua Ek Kay was a pioneer within the Chinese ink art tradition. Today, his work is part of the fabric of modern Singapore, and his influence is felt beyond walls and beyond borders.
Now, what kind of medium do you think that's done on? How do you do Chinese ink work? On paper. What kind of paper? Rice paper, yes. So this was originally done on rice paper with ink.
Yet when his first works emerged, they created shockwaves that still resonate decades later. This is the story of how the quiet genius of one man came to shatter convention and define a new frontier in an age-old artistic form. A story told by the people who knew him best.
他有时候他静静坐在那边，我问他你在做干什么？他说他在构思啊，要怎么样画一张画，所以他花的时间，他画呢是相当快，但是他花在构思的时间就比较长。他有时候坐在那边静静，就不要这样。有时候我们就知道他在构思他的画画，他创作。就静静坐在那边让他这样。
Today mine is on doing a Chinese ink painting landscape. I always feel that Chinese ink painting brushstroke is the essence. Throughout the whole history, different period, different artists, they produce different methods. To control a brush, first you must understand how much ink, how much water inside here. Is it very wet or dry or moderate? So when I get ink or water, I do feel the amount of ink or water inside there. So you can see that when I hold my brush there for a moment, you can see the wetness. So when I move far, I can see lines. The ink or water getting less and less, so getting drier and drier. So you're playing in between wet and dry. Ek Kay and me became very close friends. The reason is same kind of hope to do something special. This can bring us together.
Chua Ek Kay was not just a painter of Chinese paintings. Yes, he used brush, he used ink, and he used paper, but he used it in a very different manner. He, of course, learned painting in the traditional way, where he would use a number of brushes to show me what is bamboo, what is cherry blossom branches that's very dry and brittle, it can break. What is a lotus stem that's juicy, full of water. He learned all that, but that's not what he wanted to paint. A perfect bird, a perfect rock, or a perfect tree. Actually, it was he who came upon Chinatown.
Singapore's Chinatown was to be a lifelong inspiration for Chua Ek Kay. From the beginning of his career as an artist in the mid-1980s, he was drawn to the old shophouses, intrigued by their forms and textures, fascinated by their cultural significance in a fast-changing urban landscape.
When he saw Chinatown, he saw the roughness of the building. And if you look at all his Chinatown paintings, they are about something that is very rough and as if it is rubbed in.
To create this series of Chinatown paintings, Ek Kay would spend days walking the streets with a camera, a sketchbook, and his young son, Benson.
I think I was 5 or 6, and just remember walking along on the backside of those old shop houses. I'll be dragging my feet along. It's hot, humid, and he'll be like right in front of me, just taking his time, you know, snapping photos of street scenes, old buildings. We're in Hong Kong Street, one of the streets that I used to frequent with my dad, and it's really changed because I can barely recognize it. This area used to be shop houses, I think. It's like lined all along the road and along the Singapore River.
This is the first of 4 large murals that Ek Kay painted for us. All of the original paintings are done on rice paper, and this first series, Ek Kay wanted to concentrate on the types of sailing ships that first came to Singapore, and he wanted to celebrate some of those early ships that used to come here. The sheer talent of the guy shines through, and even in the most simple of bus strokes, you just go, wow, it's absolutely stunning.
This is not Chinatown, but it does look like Chinatown, because if you were here in Singapore in the 40s and the 50s, most of Singapore looked like Chinatown because it wasn't so developed then. Now we've only got this little area called Chinatown where you see all the old stuff. But in the old days, this is how a lot of the streets look like. And this is a painting of the Teochew Street. Have you heard of that street? Teochew Street? And that's where the artist lived and he grew up. So he has a lot of memories of that place. When he painted it much later, he painted it from his memory. So it gives you a feel of what this area used to look like before.
我个人认为，他这个画的最好的作品，很重要的作品，应该是他的老街系列，也就是他的老屋子。笔墨表达方式上是很简练的，就是大笔触，然后中间的那些墨韵，你可以感觉到跟一般的中国传统水墨的那种画法不一样的地方。那么这一张他会画我们新加坡一个著名的地点，我们叫老巴沙的时候，他也把这个感觉给画上去了。前面呢是它的主体，老巴沙那边的一些老屋子，你看它用很重墨，表现出这个屋子是很旧，可是呢又有一些活动，就是你看中间的那些人物啊、脚踏车啊，你知道这个屋子还是可以再用的，还有人住的，或者是 有人在用的。然后背景呢，他把高楼大厦给很简单的画出来，当为是他的一个背景。可是背景前后景感觉是融在一起，很传统的水墨功力的一个表现手法，可是呢又很现代。这个也是依稀从一开始一直延续下来的一个画画方向。
We have here a Chua Ek Kay street scenes collection of about 30 paintings that he donated to SMU. The paintings that he has given us, we have arranged them in a certain way that allows us to take a look at how he has developed his style in terms of just the street scenes. And I think this is one of the biggest collection of street scenes together, and that spans a period of about 20 years. So starting from here, we have this early painting in 1986. These paintings here of the street scenes are different from those that were in his early paintings. There's a confidence to abstract the works. They no longer have to be accurate, detailed, small lines, but you just look at the huge strokes. All the energy actually represents his greatest strength with using the brush and Chinese ink.
Yet Ek Kay had trained and learned his craft under a renowned Chinese ink master, Fan Chang Tian. Fan taught traditional techniques, classical poetry, painting, seal carving, and at the heart of it all, calligraphy.
跟他蔡依熙在跟方先学画的那段时间，他每次在家里，他很用功的，因为这个是他的兴趣，所以他也很快乐。我觉得他很快乐，那么他就每次画。那时候他也还没有成为全职画家的时候，他一面工作一面画在家里，有时候画到很迟3更半夜。
Now, going a little bit back to art history, Fan Tian, would have been what is known in art history as a Shanghai school painter. And a Shanghai school painter because Shanghai being a more cosmopolitan and modern city in the course of 19th, 20th century. Therefore, you have a group of artists here looking at traditional Chinese paintings and then exploring, understanding the fundamentals of Chinese painting, and yet trying to capture new subject matters. I mean, you are in the 20th century, so it's not always just about landscapes and so on. And therefore, it is about Chinese aesthetics made into a more urban context. Fan Tian must have passed on this kind of values, of respecting the tradition, and yet there is innovation.
The world that Chua Ek Kay sought to convey was modern, urban Singapore. A world not only of sights, but also of sounds, smells, tastes. One of his greatest pleasures was traditional food, partaken with friends or family.
我第一次认识依稀，我就知道他对吃这方面相当有兴趣。他的工作时间是比较不一定的，因为他比较吃完了，他才回去画画或者看书什么的时候。这样我们多数就会跑来这边吃一点东西，运动完了就吃一点东西，这样。就是我们这后面也是一个巴萨来的，然后我们
吃完了之后，就在这边谈一些，有时候谈一些话，有时候就没有什么讲话了，因为他的人比较近。
AK actually owned a restaurant at one point, and when he visited my place one day, and I tried to cook out something, and he was quietly looking at it. Then he told me, I actually used to run a restaurant, and I'm quite good with cooking. So we would go to Chinese restaurants and so on together. And what you're looking at here is something that AK and I both love. An environment like this in Singapore, to me, is very, community oriented. It's very communal. You sit down and a coffee shop kind of place. There's a certain feeling of ease, when you sit down and talk and so on.
Ek Kay's Singapore was a feast for the senses. This was the world he sought to convey through his art.
To me, Chinese painting is conceptual art. They are observing the changes in nature, the form, the structure. After some time, they would say that is a process of digestion. Digest the understanding of the nature. And from there, they produce a work. Maybe adding their own personal characters, the artist's feeling, the artist's understanding. Myself and AK spend a lot of time in just watching to feel the change of the nature. I won't say this is by memory. This is reproducing through the idea, perceptually, observation, and conceptually, thinking.
This approach, conceptual rather than representational, was striking to the artist's young son.
When I was young, I would just wonder sometimes, why is everything, it seems out of focus, like it lacks photo finish definition. Right now, when I think back on the experiences with my father and the places that we've walked past, and I've sort of come to realize that maybe he was trying to, convey a certain sense of, mystique or haziness due to, time. Your memory doesn't really give you that much detail when you recall a certain location.
A sense of change with the passage of time is inescapable in Singapore. Ek Kay felt the force of urbanisation as traditional buildings made way for a new cityscape.
As part of growing up in Singapore, there is a sense of anxiety about loss of cultural identity, part of urbanization and modernization and all that. And for an artist, one would be very sensitive about time and changes and holding on over a longer period of time. And in Chinese art, it's kind of easy to do that because, you start talking about a Song Dynasty artist and Ming Dynasty artists and so on, and your reference points would easily go back to 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, so on and so forth. And AK was doing a lot of this, trying to look back and look at how painting was done and what it means to try to capture what is current, what is, what you see around you, and yet referencing back to this earlier framework of aesthetics, of some basic human values that may be captured through the paintings over time.
Ek Kay's street scenes were the result of this search for contemporary expression using traditional forms. But this fusion of the traditional and the modern brought a deep inner struggle for Ek Kay.
When we first learned Chinese ink painting with him, actually he was teaching us Chinese ink tradition, the brush, the ink work, and so on. And he himself was also trained in the traditional ink painting, but he was trying to find something else. And in trying to find something to break out of that tradition, I think there was a conflict within him, a big conflict, because that was the time when he felt if he went a little bit further away from the tradition of Chinese ink painting, would the community accept it?
Sometimes they say, am I a traitor? He asked that question, and I thought, oh well, you can't be too serious. No, you can't be a traitor by just being a modern artist. He had asked questions like, am I so-called betraying my tradition if I were to do something that's more modern? And we said, as long as the elements of Chinese ink and brush are there, it is still a Chinese ink painting.
To some practitioners of traditional Chinese ink painting, Ek Kay's innovations were shocking.
In Chinese ink painting circles, we very clearly define you belong to which school, what school, you must follow the school to do. See, you are not allowed to do something very far away. The master or the teacher teach you this way to do this way. Then if you're not following the master's work or not following the teacher's work, you'll get scolding from the teacher. Singaporean is actually more Chinese than the Chinese in China. The Chinese here, they're trying to keep the traditions so tight. I heard local artists scolding Ek Kay right in front of me. Let's go.
Different Chinese painting society, they would comment that it just isn't done because there are certain forms that you have to observe, or certain themes or contexts that you must follow if you want to be considered, if you want to consider a piece as Chinese ink painting. And then he got really upset for a while. He was like, oh, but I'm still following the forms, I'm still using the brush strokes, I'm still using the same medium.
后来我在画册里面看到他有一首诗，就是写当时的心情。风吹星月动，浪迹海涛深。山海此时节，宫廷作无根。迎风经丈河，始兴在沧浪。松指言秋落，泉流一静听，一觉何相往？满堂和月清。他这首诗就是因为他当时很苦闷的心情，但是后来他忽然间感觉到，他不要管这么多了，他不要被这个包袱，就是传统的包袱，给他太大的负担。他觉得艺术应该从生活来发出来，到最后他觉得，他艺术呢是不分东西，应该超越时空。
Ek Kay met with some pressure on how he was being unconventional. However, there is a difference between convention and tradition. I mean, convention sounds more like a form, that you conform to a certain convention, so to speak. Whereas tradition sounds like there's something more going on. So for Ek Kay, it is to look at tradition and to critique convention, if you like.
Of course, he wasn't happy, but he feels sad. But he's the kind of person, if you find that I'm no good, I still will fight for my truth. He still continue. That you need guts to do so.
Instead of falling back into a more traditional approach, Ek Kay advanced further into his search for his own form of expression. He persisted, and after a few years began to receive a more positive reception. In 1991, his painting, My Haunt, won a prestigious Singapore Art Award, the UOB Painting of the Year. Around this time, Ek Kay studied Western art, at home in Singapore and abroad in Tasmania. The effect on his work was profound.
When he came back from Tasmania after his BA, a few days later, I went to his place. He showed me the work, Song of Cicada. My eye, I hold my breath. Wow, 太好了, very good. Okay, very good. Because straight away I can feel what he felt at that moment. I understand that he was lonely there, pursuing his study, facing difficult time, and only few pieces of leaf, signifying that this is the end of autumn. That time this painting wasn't given a name yet, no name. Only few pieces of leaf flying there. And later on, when he wanted to expose this work to the public, he gave a name, Song of Cicada.
I went to see an exhibition called The Colors of Infinity. Something that blew me away was the Song of the Cicada. And when I entered this room, it floored me because I think it was extreme. It was like an extreme essence that he was dealing with. It was more to do with poetry and essence than anything to do with what we know of in this world.
Cicada only appear actively in summer. When it comes to autumn, getting less. But this cicada still fighting hard to call. Although you don't see any cicada in the painting, but the feeling there. So, indicating our life, no matter how hard, we still can make a sound to tell that you're present. Although in a very short time, you're going to pass away.
There's something extreme about the way it's being, the composition, where it was only a couple of spots. But the way he placed them, there was a certain kind of poetic precision to it, and one needs to experience it to get the intensity of it, of that space. And in that sense, I think we talk about the quietness of Ek Kay, and I kind of like matched it with this work, you know, that stability. But yet there was something quite mad, bewildering about it. It was really striking for me.
When I first saw Song of Cicada, I emphasize the word look, upon it as a piece of music. Paintings exactly provide you the opportunity of, creating your own kind of imagination. And what is more important is for you to go through and forth between music understood in terms of imagery, and images understood in terms of space, and the space understood in terms of what is inner to yourself, a kind of psychological inner space.
Ek Kay's ability to innovate was as much to do with his use of space as his use of ink.
Here we see a painting, one of the largest ones that Ek Kay did for us, called Boat Quay. And this painting itself is about 22 meters long. And what is quite remarkable about it is it's got one panel in there that's got absolutely nothing on it. And I looked at it and went, Ek Kay, what happened? No, this is part of the composition. And it's like, but there's nothing on it. Trust me, it's part of the artwork. And sure enough, it works beautifully. Who would have thought that you'd go out and paint a mural and you'd leave one panel completely blank? But he did, and it's stunning.
Soon after seeing Song of Cicada, Ian Wu curated an exhibition of new Singaporean art. Chua Ek Kay was a natural choice.
So he came with this painting that was really large. It was all crumpled. Yeah, so he unfolded it in front of me the next day. I was a bit stressed out because it was like one day before the setup. I mean, we all hung almost everything except his work. And I think he brought this crumple and he flipped it open, and it was like the yellow door.
Yellow door was to mark a paradigm shift in Chinese ink painting. Today, it is carefully preserved in the Heritage Conservation Centre of Singapore. But at that first exhibition, the haste of its creation left no time to display it by traditional means. It was simply nailed to the wall. Its subject was equally challenging and equally controversial.
Of course, nobody could understand that this is a yellow door. Why? Because the door is executed in an ink splash manner, where he poured the color onto the paper and he used the brush to drive it around in a rhythm that showed you the door, the rhythm of a door, and that is called the pouring ink technique.
The way he painted it, it was not descriptive. I mean, you look at the yellow door, it's very interesting. When you stand far away, you get that magic. When you get close to it, it's just paper, ink, and it's not complicated, but to be able to create a kind of space that is almost magical, that's something that's really unique. It was more to do with a kind of essence of matter. I mean, yeah. So I used the word metaphysical, more to do with a kind of beyond the physical.
那么一夕自己对这个黄门，他有写一篇小文章，也就是写几句话，代表他为什么画这幅黄门这样。他说：“这是我的第一张黄门。”就是他画第一张黄门的时候，他说这个黄门是写1992年。 他在门外那边徘徊，就是走来走去啊。我怀旧之际，怀念那牛车水，一面墙壁片瓦，就是说他在怀念这个旧的屋子。这些旧屋子也是代表旧的文化，也是新加坡的一些文化来的啦。他说：“我怀念那雨水洗涤不去岁月之痕，并没有多久，这一切就会丧失掉。就是说不久了，这些就会被拆掉了，连这个黄门也被拆掉。就是说，雨水洗掉是把它变成很久了，到那墙壁已经很旧，那建筑很旧。不过，它的这个东西呢，还永远还是在那边。” 这是另外一个意思，就是说背后还有这个文化还是在的啦。以后让我变，他说希望它变成那片那个墙壁那个王门，听我倾诉，就要听我说吧，听我说。我打开黄门，他又进去黄门里面。第一次我踏进去那黄门，那么他觉得他踏进这个黄门，就是等于踏进他自己的世界。 然后，但是他又觉得我被拒于黄门，就是他进不了，因为，这些东西只是一个形象而已，踏不进去了。就是说，他拒绝在外面，他想进去，他进不了，因为那个门关在外面。其实都是有另外一个意思啦，但是他只是他的内心的对这片黄门的感觉这样。
Was yellow door evolutionary in Chinese ink painting in Singapore? I think perhaps it's best to think of that as a kind of coming together of abstract art and Chinese paintings. People were perhaps looking for something like this. I mean, you want to be modern, you want to be international, at the same time, you want to have the kind of local identity, you want to have something Asia in this. And I think Yellow Door would certainly open the doors for exactly all this. Yeah.
Opening doors to a new way of thinking about Chinese ink, Ek Kay had a profound influence on a new, emerging generation of Chinese ink artists. Among them, Tay Bak Chang.
所以他的画，当开始我在接触他的作品的时候，其实有时候我会觉得，咦，这个我并没有太多的能够理解，可是我又会吸引我去看，因为里面有一些东西，我觉得是我缺乏的就是因为一些先生他把一些他过去熟悉的传统的某些东西，先暂时放下，然后建立新的手法，所以我觉得这个是非常困难的。觉得他给许多人做了一个很好的示范，就是你要真实的、真诚的面对你自己内心所听到或者所看到的声音。所以当我去看他的画展的时候，我会期待下一个会是怎么样。所以当他有画展的时候，我心里会想，这次会看到什么样的东西。
Ek Kay created a major series of works evoking lotus ponds. But these were a long way from traditional depictions of the lotus in flower.
Lotus pond, normally lotus leaf flower in the pond. That's traditional, but it's not. You only have branches, dry leaf, like lotus growing period already over, coming into autumn time. The flower, the leaf already turning dry out, and the branch are already broken. So from there he developed and have purely only lines. So this is conceptual, and others will think that this is abstract. But to me, this is not abstract. Conceptual is true thinking. So he was doing conceptual art.
Further studies and further travels to Indonesia, to Australia, prompted fresh innovation. This time, not only with ink. Ek Kay began to experiment with oils and acrylic, and new tools, all of which came together in his painting of Mount Merapi in Indonesia.
One of the things that he did was he actually worked with a palette knife in place of a classical Chinese brush. And he used every dimension of the palette knife, the back of it, the flat side of it, just to create some form of texture. But the other clever thought that he actually had was experimenting with the idea of perspective. And one of the things which classical Chinese painting is that, everything's almost very flat. But he had tried to instill his own particular perspective on this, so that you looked at the foreground first before you actually looked at the background. So these were sort of like ideas that he was trying to, flirt with and sort of, come to terms with in these works. But for me, the magic was his actual use of the acrylic and the palette knife for this work.
Ek Kay frequently travelled with his close friend and fellow ink painter Lim Chun Jin, including a memorable trip to the Buddhist temple site of Borobudur in Indonesia.
We stayed in front of Borobudur, and that particular night, the moonshine is very bright. We enjoyed to be there. Ek Kay was very happy. He got a feeling, but he kept the feeling. When he came back, he did this piece. When I look at the work, I can really feel it. I am sitting right in front of the Borobudur with him. At that moment, he was so joyful, but at the same time, I just miss a friend. Just like that. Become memory. All these things become memory.
The temple site at Borobudur held special meaning for Ek Kay. He returned to visit it several times, and it became a recurring subject in his art. On one trip to Indonesia, Ek Kay worked with the abstract expressionist artist Putu. This experience would mark a turning point for Ek Kay.
Putu splashes paint around, mixes his acrylics with water and has a good spontaneous involvement with his canvas, which was something very foreign to Ek Kay. They were both working on a canvas together. And when Putu started working on this canvas, Ek Kay's eyes almost popped. He was like, here's someone breaking every barrier that traditional Chinese art had. And Ek Kay was astounded, and he was also a bit sort of like unnerved by the whole experience. And I was there looking at it, and I could feel the tension in his eyes, and I removed myself from the whole situation, and I just let both of them get on with it. And when I came back about 10 minutes later, he was giggling, because he was having fun. It was as if he was liberated, or like a small child, allowed to do whatever he wanted to do in the toy shop. And he was splashing paint all over, and he was going for it with such a gusto. It was amazing. But there was genuine happiness in his expression, in his voice, in his strokes. He was just very happy.
Back in Singapore, Ek Kay began to collaborate with artists at the Singapore Tyler Print Institute, pushing the boundaries of his art and his character to their limits. He explored the new medium of paper pulp painting.
Ek Kay was a very fast learner. He was pushing not just Chinese contemporary painting, he was pushing Chinese contemporary pulp painting. I think he was the first Chinese artist that really pushed through the boundary.
And he experimented with printing, working on plates, film, and stone.
He had a very strong desire to work on stone. He was kind of keep requesting, can I work on stone? Can I work on stone? Then, since it takes long time to prepare it, beginning we are a little bit hesitate. Eventually we say, okay, why not? Let's do it. So we pick it up, the biggest stone for him that we have. I spent almost like 4 or 5 days just to grind the stone. I think as a working relationship, it was also like a happy moment that we accommodate what he really wanted to try, and he get to try that.
The reflections. The first thing that strikes you about this piece is how different it is to the other 4 mural paintings. He called me up and he said, I've got this idea of doing a piece based around reflections. I was walking the Singapore River the other night and I saw these ripples of reflections on there, and I wanted to do an artwork that kind of celebrates that. He then determined exactly the number of panels that he needed, and then he made every single piece individually. And it wasn't until he came into the station and saw it all installed that he actually for the very first time saw this piece in its entirety. And he was absolutely stunned and thrilled. He was really, really good. He was smiling like a Cheshire cat. And he was just so happy.
In 2004, Ek Kay was diagnosed with a terminal illness. It had a profound effect on his work.
I noticed there's a change. Before the signal, his work is more careful. More careful in the sense that more structural. He spent more time, more patient to do the work. When he's sick, when it comes to this period, his work a bit impatient. And I look at the ink mark, sometimes the ink mark is a little bit out of control.
Ek Kay began to experiment more with colour.
There was a sudden change of color. Color are more explosive. I think Ek Kay do really feels that something is coming to an end. I think he could really feel it. So he just want to maximize himself without any reserve.
I think he lost some kind of fear. Yeah, how to say? We all have like a fear of failure or fear of not doing right. But I think his attitude is there's no fear of losing anything. You know, you live, you do. It's a pure joy actually of living.
To me, all artists are blind. You cannot see your own mistake. When they finish, what? You need other people to tell you the problem. So Ek Kay could be the right person. Now, I did not get anybody to look at the work. To me, actually, he is a true friend. It's difficult to get a friend like that, I find.
像我感觉在他在的时候，我现在在做他的东西，所以就是可能因为我在做东西，他给我一股力量，就是好像还在继续。梦到一些有时候就很清楚，有时候就很模糊有时候好像在家里走动。而且我这几年一些很早就信佛，但是我还没有这么投入。但是这几年就是一有空我去听一些师父讲经，或者自己看一些佛书。我觉得它里面的一些真理上的生活可以给我一些生活的启示，所以就让我走下。
I think in his 20 years he has accomplished so much more than what some people can accomplish in 40 years. So it is quite amazing if you look at the path of how he developed. Immortality is really not living the life, but it is leaving something of yourself through others and letting it continue into the future. That, I think, is more immortality without the physical aspects of it. And I think that part will live on in us.
We are seeing a new chapter, being written on ink painting history. I think Ek Kay certainly set the groundwork for an ink painter to be experimental, not to be confined within conventions. That being formulaic about painting is certainly not the way to go. So his dual inspirations, going deep into history as well as looking at what is current and cutting edge, is a kind of example that would underpin many of the young artists doing contemporary ink works.